is up, everybody? Matt here, back again with another video for you. Today we're going to be talking about a record label, Disneyland Records. Being a fan of Disneyland and the Disney parks, I'm always on the lookout for the vinyls that were produced for the theme park attractions. I always think that those are really cool. And in my searching for those records, I came across a lot of Disney records that had the label Disneyland Records. And that always kind of confused me because some of them were for movies, some of them were for pop artists, and I decided to do a little digging and find out what exactly was the deal with Disneyland Records. And what I found was actually pretty interesting. For a time, pretty much all Disney records were produced under the Disneyland Records label. This label was originally founded in 1956 by Walt Disney, his brother Roy, and Jimmy Johnson, who had worked with the studio for a number of years. Before that decision was made, the records came out on pretty much every label possible. Anybody that they could get to publish their music, they would. And it wasn't until the Davy Crockett single came out that they decided, hey, we should start producing our own records. The show Davy Crockett actually premiered on the Disneyland TV show, which Walt had created to promote Disneyland Park, which would then spin off into a bunch of other cool things. And that particular record was #1 for a couple months, and it was actually #7 overall for the year that it was released. And it caused all kinds of crazy Frontier Mania and Crockett Mania and all that stuff. So yeah, pretty cool. The first official album produced under the Disneyland Records label was an album called A Children's Garden of Verses. Almost immediately, the record label began producing soundtracks for Disney animated films. What was interesting was that the label actually produced stuff and released stuff that was not officially a Disney film. What happened was they released a single for a song called Ringle Wrangle, and it proved really popular. And because of that, they were like, hey, let's produce other stuff. As long as it's kid-friendly, let's put it out there. And it proved incredibly successful for them, which is kind of why you see like Disneyland Records on some stuff and you're like, I didn't know Disney made that. Well, they didn't. They just produced the music for it. To handle material that was more pop-oriented and more geared towards adults, they hired a guy by the name of Tutti Camerata, I think is how you pronounce that. I'm reading it off my phone. But they just called him Toots, so there you go. Incredible jazz musician, there you go. He actually suggested to Walt, hey, you should build your own recording studio. And Walt was like, well, I don't really want to do that. But if, you should do it, if you really want to do that. And Toots did, produced tons of records, tons of material, and it proved very successful for him. What was really cool about Toots was that he began to do jazz interpretations of Disney songs, and those are really, really beautiful. I love listening to those. I always love when artists will take their spin on Disney tracks and things like that. Vitamin String Quartet, there's a great CD called Classical Disney, which is really, really good. But yeah, I always like it when you hear an artist's interpretation of their work. Yeah, pretty cool. Toots would even bring in other artists like Louis Armstrong to make songs for the Disney label, and Louis Armstrong would then later go on to have a part in the film Disneyland After Dark. It was even Toots' idea to get Annette Funicello as the kind of star of the Disneyland Records label. It was his idea. He saw a lot of potential in her, and they were like, well, yeah, but we got to get her something to sing. And while looking for some artists to create music for her, they found these guys, the Sherman Brothers, who, that name is synonymous with Mary Poppins and Winnie the Pooh, the Tiki Room, It's a Small World, Jungle Book. These guys were like the Lennon and McCartney of creating Disney music, and they did a lot of it. So yeah, it's cool that because they brought in Toots, they got, all this domino effect of all this cool stuff that happened because of it. In 1965, they actually began producing the read-along records. I actually had the later tape ones that were produced under the Walt Disney Records label, and mine were for Aladdin and Darkwing Duck, and I think I had a couple other ones, but yeah, I think everybody has an experience with a read-along tape or a read-along CD, and odds are it was probably Disney when we first had it. In 1971, the first name change happened. It went from Disneyland Records to Disneyland/Vista Records. and it would just kind of continue from there. They then began a partnership with Rankin and Bass, the guys who did the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer holiday special and tons of other holiday specials and cartoons and things like that. And they even produced the music for the 1977 version of The Hobbit that those guys did. The kind of last hurrah for the Disneyland Records label was the Mickey Mouse Disco record, which proved really popular, and they were like, you know, we want to do more of this. We want to do pop-oriented kids stuff that can appeal to adults and appeal to teenagers, and so they eventually, in 1988, just said, we're going to call it Walt Disney Records, and that was it. That was pretty much all of it. Thankfully, my mom and my aunt saved some of their 45s from this particular era, and they're really cool. I love looking at those. A lot of great stuff geared towards kids, very colorful, you know, very bright, very, you know, really just a cool artistic representation of the work, and very true of the work that it was representing for kids. Very, very cool. Probably my favorite 45 that I have from Disneyland Records is the Haunted Mansion one. Thank you, Jen. It's really cool for a number of reasons. Number one, the narrator is Thurl Ravenscroft, who is one of the singing busts in the Haunted Mansion attraction, but he's also best known as Tony the Tiger. He's got that very deep, you know, bass voice. And the little kid in the story is played by Ron Howard, so, you know, there you go, very cool. And the illustrations include the Hatbox Ghost, which was a character that was in the attraction when it originally opened, but was eventually taken out not too long after the attraction did open. Since then, he became kind of an icon for the fans of the attraction and things like that, and they eventually brought him back in a whole new effect, you know, type deal. I'm probably going to do a whole video on Haunted Mansion, just because there's a lot of cool stories to talk about with that, but that's probably my favorite 45 that I own. I always like finding the Disneyland records, just because they're very colorful and they're very cool, and even if the record itself is not in the best condition, you know, the album art and the sketches and the things that come with it, they're so cool. You could just put it on your wall and, you know, just have it there. And that's the main thing I suggest with, you know, these records or children's records in general, is that, I mean, it's cool if you want to find them and listen to them, but odds are, you know, because they belong to kids, they probably got destroyed. They probably got a lot of wear and tear, but sometimes you get lucky and you find one that's in pretty good shape. And I think that's what's really cool, is that you can get whatever you want and just kind of reminisce and think about times gone by. So there you go. Very interesting story about the history of Disneyland Records. Very, very cool. And by the way, when I say produced, I don't mean that they were in the studio like telling them how to make the music. I mean that they produced the record that they were producing. Just thought I should say that real quick. Probably save myself a couple comments for that. So they released the records. When I say produce, I mean they released the records. So there you go. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this particular video. I will see you guys next time.